The morning fog hung thick over Seoul as Judge Park Dae-ho walked into the military courthouse. His black robes felt heavy on his shoulders, but not as heavy as the decisions he would make today. The war had been going on for 2 years now, and every day brought new cases of people trying to survive by any means necessary. Park sat behind his wooden desk and looked at the schedule. Today he would see 15 cases, mostly soldiers who had stolen food or civilians caught trading without permits. His assistant, a thin man named Lee, placed a cup of weak tea beside his papers. "The first case is ready, sir," Lee said quietly. "Bring them in," Park replied, adjusting his glasses. The courtroom was small and cold. Wooden benches sat empty except for a few soldiers who were waiting for their own cases. The walls were bare, except for a picture of President Lee and a Korean flag. That had seen better days. A young woman entered the room between 2 military police officers. She wore a dirty green uniform that was too big for her small frame. Her name was Kim Min-ji, according to the papers. She was 22 years old and had been caught selling cigarettes and canned food near the Dongdaemun market. Park looked at her over his glasses. She stood straight despite the handcuffs on her wrists. Her face was thin from not eating enough, but her eyes were bright and determined. Something about her reminded him of his own daughter, though he pushed that thought away quickly. "Corporal Kim Min-ji," Park said in a loud voice. "You are charged with illegal trading and black market activities. How do you answer?" Min-ji lifted her chin. "I was helping people, sir. Children who have no parents and old people who cannot find food." Park frowned. These criminals always had excuses. During wartime, everyone suffered, but that did not give people the right to break the law. The black market was dangerous because it took supplies away from the military and made prices go up for everyone else. "The law is clear," Park said firmly. "Trading without proper permits is illegal. It does not matter what your reasons were." The prosecutor, Captain Cho, stood up and read from his notes. "Your Honor, the defendant was found with 50 packs of American cigarettes, 20 cans of beef and medical supplies. She was selling these items for 3 times their normal price." Min-ji stepped forward, her chains rattling. "Sir, please listen to me. I was not selling for profit. I was trading for rice and blankets for the orphans at the destroyed school on Myeongdong Street. The children are hungry and sick." Park waved his hand to silence her. He had heard similar stories before. Everyone claimed they were helping others. When they got caught breaking the law. The war had made people desperate, but that was no excuse for crime. "Do you have any proof of these orphans?" Park asked. Min-ji looked around the room desperately. I can bring witnesses. Mrs. Han, who helps me, and Teacher Song, who takes care of the children." "You should have thought of that before you broke." "The law," Park said coldly. He had seen too many cases like this. People who thought the war gave them permission to do whatever they wanted. Captain Cho continued reading the charges. The military police had been watching Min-ji for weeks. They had seen her meeting with different people, exchanging goods and moving supplies around the city. To them, she looked like a professional black market trader. Min-ji tried to speak again. "Your Honor, my parents died fighting the Japanese. I know what it means to serve my country. I would never do anything to hurt our soldiers or our people." Park looked at her with cold eyes. During the war, many people claimed their parents were heroes. It was an easy lie to tell when most records had been destroyed in the fighting. "Your family history does not excuse your crimes," Park said. "The military needs those supplies you were trading. Every cigarette and can of food you sold illegally could have gone to our brave soldiers fighting on the front lines." The young woman's shoulders sagged slightly, but she did not give up. "Please, sir, come with me to see the children. They are living in the basement of the old school. They have nothing." Park slammed his hand on the desk. "Enough. I will not be manipulated by your stories. This court deals with facts, not emotions." He looked at his papers and made his decision quickly. Cases like this were simple. The law was broken. The evidence was clear and punishment must follow. "Kim Min-ji, you are found guilty of illegal trading and black market activities. You are fined 200,000 won and sentenced to 30 days of public service cleaning military facilities. You will also receive a public reprimand to be read in the city center." Min-ji's face went pale. 200,001 was more money than most people saw in a year. The public reprimand meant her name would be announced as a criminal, making it almost impossible for her to find work after the war. "Sir, please," she whispered, "I do not have that much money. And if people think I am a criminal, who will help the children?" Park was already writing his decision. "You should have considered that before you chose to break the law." Next case. The military police led Min-ji away. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. "The children on Myeongdong Street, sir, please remember them." Park did not look up from his papers. 3 weeks after the trial, Judge Park Dae-ho sat in his office reading through morning reports. The war was getting worse, and more cases came to his desk every day. He had almost forgotten about the young woman who claimed to be helping orphans until Major Kim walked into his office with a thick folder. "Judge Park, I need to speak with you about something important," Major Kim said, closing the door behind him. He was the head of military intelligence for the Seoul district, and his visits usually meant serious business. Park looked up from his papers. "What is it, Major?" Major Kim sat down and opened his folder. "We have been investigating supply networks in the city. Someone has been very good at moving medical supplies and food to refugee camps without being detected by North Korean spies." "That sounds like good news," Park said, wondering why the Major looked so serious. "It is good news, but we discovered something that might interest you." Major Kim pulled out several photographs and spread them on Park's desk. "Do you recognize this woman?" Park looked at the pictures. They showed a young woman in civilian clothes talking to UN soldiers, carrying boxes of supplies, and working with children in what looked like a damaged building. It took him a moment to realize who it was. "That is Kim Min-ji," Park said slowly. "The woman I sentenced for black market trading," Major Kim nodded. "Yes, we have been watching her activities for the past month. What we found is very different from what appeared in your courtroom." The Major pulled out more documents. "Kim Min-ji has been running a relief network that has helped over 300 displaced families. She repairs radios for UN forces and uses the money to buy supplies legally from military surplus stores." Park stared at the papers. "But she was caught with illegal goods. The military police saw her selling items for high prices." "That part is true," Major Kim explained, "but she was not keeping the money. She was trading expensive items like cigarettes to wealthy people so she could buy more rice and medicine for families who had nothing." The Major showed Park a hand-drawn map. It showed locations all over Seoul marked with small symbols. She created this network after the Battle of Seoul last year. When families lost their homes, she found them places to stay. When children lost their parents, she made sure they had food. Park felt something cold in his stomach. "How do you know all this?" "We started investigating because North Korean agents were trying to infiltrate refugee camps. We needed to understand who was organizing the displaced people." Major Kim pointed to the photographs. "What we found was that Kim Min-ji had already created a system that was working better than our official relief efforts." The Major pulled out a notebook filled with names and numbers. "She keeps records of every family she helps. She knows which children need medicine, which old people cannot walk far to get food, and which families have skills that could help others." Park picked up one of the photographs. It showed Min-ji kneeling beside a small boy who was lying on a blanket. She was feeding him with a spoon, and the child was smiling. "The radio repair business," Major Kim continued, "started when she found broken communication equipment after the Chinese attack. She taught herself how to fix radios by watching UN technicians. Now she repairs equipment for 3 different army units." "Why did she not tell the court about this?" Park asked, though. He already knew the answer. Major Kim looked at him seriously. "Would you have believed her? A young woman claiming to help orphans while being arrested for trading illegal goods." Park remembered how he had dismissed her pleas in court. He had been so sure that she was just another criminal making excuses. "There is more," Major Kim said. "The supplies she was caught with came from a UN unit that was throwing away damaged goods. She had permission from Sergeant Murphy to take items that were going to be destroyed. Anyway." The Major showed Park an official letter. It was written in English, but someone had translated it into Korean. It gave Kim Min-ji permission to collect surplus medical supplies and food that were no longer needed by the military. The military. Police who arrested her did not check with the UN forces, Major Kim explained. They saw Korean civilians with American goods and assumed it was illegal trading. Park looked through more photographs. They showed Min-ji teaching children how to read, helping elderly people repair their homes and organizing groups of refugees to clean up bomb damage in their neighborhoods. She has created jobs for 50 people, Major Kim said. Women who lost their husbands are now helping with the radio repairs. Men who were injured in the fighting are teaching children in the refugee camps. Park set down the photographs and rubbed his temples. He had given this woman a huge fine and public humiliation for trying to help her people survive the war. What happened to the fine? Park asked quietly. She is working extra hours fixing radios to pay it. It will take her 8 months at her current rate. Major Kim gathered up his papers. Judge Park, we need people like Kim Min-ji. Her network has prevented refugee camps from becoming breeding grounds for communist agents. After Major Kim left, Park sat alone in his office staring at the photographs. The young woman who had stood in his courtroom begging him to see the children was the same person who had quietly saved hundreds of lives. He picked up his pen and began writing a letter. To the military command, there were things that needed to be corrected, and he was the only one who could do it. Judge Park Dae-ho could not sleep that night. The photographs of Kim Min-ji helping children kept appearing in his mind every time he closed his eyes. He had made a terrible mistake, but he needed to understand how it had happened. The next morning, he decided to investigate Min-ji's background himself. Park drove his old car through the damaged streets of Seoul to the records office. Most of the building had been destroyed during the Chinese attack, but some files were still kept in the basement. The clerk, an elderly man named Mr. Yoon, helped him search through boxes of papers. Kim Min-ji, born 1930, Mr. Yoon read from a damaged file. Parents were Kim Tae-sung and Lee Young-ja. Both were involved in independence activities against Japanese occupation. Park looked at the faded documents. Min-ji's father had been a teacher who secretly organized resistance meetings. Her mother had carried messages between different resistance groups. In 1943, when Min-ji was 13 years old, both parents were arrested by Japanese police. What happened to them? Park asked. Mr. Yoon pointed to a stamp on the paper. Executed at Seodamun prison. The girl was too young to arrest, so they sent her to live with relatives. Park felt his chest tighten. Min-ji had told the truth about her parents being heroes, but he had not believed her. The next file showed that Min-ji's relatives had also died during the final years of Japanese occupation. At age 15, she was completely alone. There were no more records until 1948, when her name appeared on a list of people working at a radio factory in Seoul. Park drove to the old factory district. Most of the buildings were now rubble, but he found an old man who remembered the radio factory. Oh yes, the Kim girl, the man said, nodding. She was very smart with electronics. The Japanese manager tried to send her away because she was Korean, but she could fix any radio faster than the Japanese workers. The old man led Park to where the factory used to stand. She worked here for 2 years, learning everything about radios and communication equipment. When the war started, she helped hide radios so people could listen to news from the south. Park began to understand how Min-ji had learned her skills. During the Japanese occupation, radios were illegal for Koreans to own. Anyone caught listening to foreign news could be imprisoned or killed. Min-ji had risked her life to help people stay. Informed, Park's next stop was the Myeongdong area, where Min-ji had claimed there were orphaned children. He found the damaged school building she had mentioned during her trial. In the basement, he discovered something that made him feel sick with shame. 23 children were living in the cold, dark basement. They ranged in age from 5 to 15 years old. An elderly woman named Mrs. Han was cooking rice over a small fire. "Are you here about Min-ji?" Mrs. Han asked when she saw Park's official uniform. "Please do not arrest her again. These children will die without her help." Park looked around the basement. The children had made beds from old blankets and cardboard. Their clothes were clean but patched many times. Despite their difficult situation, they seemed healthy and were studying with old books. "How long has Min-ji been helping here?" Park asked. "Since the Chinese attack last winter," Mrs. Han replied. She found these children hiding in bombed buildings. Some had watched their parents die. Others got separated during the evacuation. Mrs. Han showed Park a notebook where Min-ji had written the name and story of each child. She knew which ones needed special medicine, which ones missed their families the most, and which ones were good at helping younger children. She brings food every few days, Mrs. Han explained, but more importantly, she gives them hope. She teaches them that they can rebuild their lives after the war. One of the older boys, about 12 years old, approached Park shyly. "Are you the judge who punished Minji Nuna?" he asked. Park nodded, feeling ashamed. "She told us not to be angry with you," the boy said. "She said you were doing your job to protect Korea, and that sometimes good people make mistakes." Park spent 2 hours in the basement, talking to the children and Mrs. Han. He learned that Minji visited 3 other locations where displaced families were living. She had organized a network of volunteers who helped with cooking, teaching, and medical care. The next day, Park visited the UN base where Minji repaired radios. Sergeant Murphy, an American soldier, was happy to talk about her work. "Kim is the best radio technician we have," Murphy said in broken Korean. "She can fix equipment that our trained soldiers cannot repair. We have been trying to hire her as an official translator and technician." Murphy showed Park the workshop where Minji worked. It was organized and clean, with rows of repaired radios waiting to be returned to different units. "She also helps us communicate with Korean civilians," Murphy explained. "Many refugees do not trust American soldiers, but they trust Kim. She helps us understand what families need most." Park realized that Minji's work was not just helping refugees. She was also helping the UN forces do their job better by building trust between Korean civilians and foreign soldiers. As Park drove home that evening, he understood the full picture of what Kim Min-ji had accomplished. An orphaned teenager had survived Japanese occupation, learned valuable skills, and used those skills to save hundreds of lives during the war. He had punished a hero for being heroic. Judge Park Dae-ho drove his car through the muddy roads toward Incheon early Saturday morning. He had learned that Kim Min-ji was working at a refugee camp near the port, helping families who had fled from North Korean territory. The drive took 3 hours because many bridges had been destroyed, and he had to take long detours around bomb craters. When Park arrived at the camp, he was shocked by what he saw. Hundreds of tents and makeshift shelters covered a field that had once been a school playground. Children were playing between the tents while their mothers cooked over small fires. Old men sat in groups, talking quietly about the homes they had lost. Park asked several people where he could find Kim Min-ji. They all pointed toward a large tent near the center of the camp. As he walked closer, he could hear her voice giving instructions to a group of volunteers. "Mrs. Park, please. Take the medicine to the families with small children first," Minji was saying. "Mr. Lee, we need more blankets in Section 3. The old people there are getting sick from the cold." Park stopped outside the tent and listened. Minji was organizing the distribution of supplies like a military commander, but her voice was gentle and patient. She knew the names of dozens of refugees and exactly what each family needed. When Park entered the tent, Minji looked up from a table covered with lists and maps. She was wearing the same dirty uniform from her trial, but now it was even more worn and patched. Her face was thinner than before, and there were dark circles under her eyes from working too many hours. "Judge Park," she said quietly, standing up. The other volunteers in the tent became silent and stared at him with suspicious eyes. "Kim Min-ji, I need to speak with you," Park said, feeling uncomfortable under the gaze of so many people who clearly did not trust him. Minji nodded to the volunteers. "Please continue the work. I will be back soon." She led Park outside the tent to a quiet area near some damaged trees. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Park had practiced what he wanted to say during the long drive, but now the words seemed difficult to find. "I came to apologize," Park finally said. "I have learned about your real work, and I know I made a terrible mistake." Minji looked at him with tired eyes. "Your mistake nearly destroyed everything I had built," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Do you know what happened?" "After your trial," Park shook his head. "The public humiliation you ordered was announced in the city center, just like you said it would be. After that, many of the families I was helping became afraid to accept my aid. They thought I was a criminal who might bring trouble to them. Minji pointed toward the refugee camp. I had to leave Seoul and come here to continue my work. Dozens of families lost their source of food and medicine because people were afraid to be associated with me. Park felt his face grow hot with shame. I did not understand. The evidence seemed clear, and I thought— You thought what? Minji interrupted. That a young Korean woman could not possibly be doing anything good. That all of us are either victims or criminals with nothing in between. Her words hit Park like a physical blow. He realized that his assumptions about Minji had been based on prejudice, not facts. During the trial you did not listen to me, Minji continued. You decided I was guilty before I even spoke. You saw a woman with American goods and assumed she was stealing from soldiers. Park tried to defend himself. The war has made many people desperate. I have seen so many cases of real criminals who claim to be helping others. So you decided to treat everyone like criminals? Minji asked. Did you investigate my story? Did you visit the children I mentioned? Did you check with the UN forces about my permission to take surplus supplies? Park remained silent because he knew the answer. He had done none of those things. I understand that you have a difficult job, Minji said, her voice becoming softer. But you have power over people's lives. When you make decisions without understanding the truth, innocent people suffer. Minji sat down on a broken concrete block and looked toward the refugee camp. After my parents died, I promised myself that I would never let other families suffer alone if I could help them. Your sentence made it much harder to keep that promise. Park sat down beside her. How? Can I fix this? What can I do to make up for my mistake? Minji was quiet for a long time. Then she said, The problem is not just your mistake, Judge Park. The problem is that the whole system assumes the worst about people like me. She pointed to her uniform. I am a woman. I am young. And I am not wealthy. In your courtroom, that makes me guilty until proven innocent. How many other people like me have you sentenced without really understanding their situations? Park thought about all the cases he had handled over the past 2 years. How many times had he made quick decisions based on appearances rather than careful investigation? How many people had he punished for trying to survive in impossible conditions? The military courts are supposed to maintain order during wartime, Minji said. But sometimes maintaining order means crushing the very people who are trying to help their communities survive. Park looked at her with new respect. This young woman had not only survived incredible hardships, but she had also learned to think clearly about complex problems. What would you do if you were a judge? Park asked. Minji smiled for the first time since he had arrived. I would remember that behind every case is a human being with a story. I would take time to understand that story before making decisions. That could destroy their life. Park nodded slowly. He had learned more about justice in this conversation than in all his years of legal training. When Judge Park Dae-ho returned to Seoul from the refugee camp, he immediately began working to correct his mistake. The first thing he did was write a formal letter to the military command requesting that Kim Minji's conviction be overturned. He spent 3 days writing and rewriting the letter, making sure to include all the evidence he had discovered about her real activities. The military officials were not happy about Park's request. Colonel Choi, who supervised the court system, called Park into his office for a meeting. Judge Park, you cannot simply change court decisions because you feel bad about them, Colonel Choi said sternly. If we start overturning convictions, people will think our courts are weak. Park had prepared for this argument. He spread out all the documents he had collected on Colonel Choi's desk. Sir, this is not about feelings. This is about facts that were not properly investigated during the trial. He showed the colonel the photographs from military intelligence, the permission letter from the UN forces, and the records of Minji's parents' service to Korean independence. Kim Minji was wrongly convicted because we did not do our job properly. Colonel Choi looked through the papers with growing concern. If this information is correct, then we have made a serious error. But overturning the conviction will require approval from higher authorities. Then let us get that approval, Park said firmly. Our courts are supposed to protect innocent people, not punish them. It took 6 weeks, but finally the military command agreed to overturn Minji's conviction. Park personally drove to Incheon to deliver the news. He found Minji in the same tent, still organizing aid for refugees. Your conviction has been officially overturned, Park told her. handing her the legal documents. "The fine has been cancelled and your public humiliation has been formally withdrawn." Minji looked at the papers with surprise. "I did not expect this to happen," she said quietly. "There is more," Park continued. "The military command wants to offer you an official position as a civilian liaison for refugee assistance. You would have a steady salary and official authority to coordinate aid efforts." Minji considered the offer carefully. "What would this job require me to do?" "You would continue the work you are already doing, but with official support. You would also help the military understand the needs of civilian populations in different areas." Minji accepted the position, and within a month, her relief network had expanded to cover 5 different refugee camps. With official backing, she could request supplies directly from military warehouses and coordinate with UN forces much more effectively. But Park's work was not finished. He began reviewing other cases that had come through his court, looking for people who might have been wrongly convicted. He found 12 cases where people had been punished for activities that were actually helping their communities. One case involved an old man who had been fined for teaching children without official permission. Park discovered that the man was a former university professor who was providing the only education available to refugee children. Park arranged for the man's conviction to be overturned and helped him establish an official school. Another case involved a young woman who had been arrested for practicing medicine without a license. Investigation showed that she was a trained nurse who had been providing the only medical care available in a remote area. Park worked with military doctors to give her official recognition and supplies. Park also began changing how his court operated. He started requiring longer investigations before trials, and he made sure that defendants had time to present evidence in their defense. He established a system where community members could testify about a defendant's character and activities. The changes were not popular with some of his colleagues. Judge Kim, who worked in the next courtroom, complained that Park was making the court system too slow and complicated. "We are in the middle of a war," Judge Kim argued. "We need to make quick decisions to maintain order." "Quick decisions are worthless if they are wrong decisions," Park replied. "Our job is to find the truth, not to process cases as fast as possible." Meanwhile, Minji's radio repair business continued to grow. After the war ended in 1953, she opened an official shop in Seoul. Her reputation for excellent work and fair prices attracted customers from all over the city. She hired other war refugees to help with the business, providing jobs for people who had lost everything. By 1955, Minji's shop had become the largest radio repair business in Seoul. She had also started manufacturing simple communication equipment for the government's reconstruction efforts. Her company employed over 50 people and had contracts with both Korean and international organizations. Park and Minji stayed in contact over the years. She would sometimes visit his court to provide expert testimony about technical matters, and he would refer people to her business when they needed communication equipment repaired. In 1958, Park was promoted to a higher court where he could influence policy for the entire Seoul region. He used his new position to establish training programs for judges, emphasizing the importance of thorough investigation and fair treatment of all defendants. Years later, when Park was about to retire, Minji visited him in his office. She brought a gift, a small radio that she had built herself. "This radio can receive signals from all over the world," she said. "I wanted you to have it because you taught me that listening carefully is the most important skill anyone can have." Park smiled as he accepted the gift. "I think you were the one who taught me that lesson." The radio sat on Park's desk for the rest of his career, reminding him every day that behind every case was a human story worth understanding.